on this issue, much more than outsiders might think or than Israelis themselves might even think.
I mean, Shir said it, and she's right. Every poll consistently shows that majority of Israelis are choosing a two-state solution. If you ask them about separation from Palestinians, if you use a different phrase, then you get bigger numbers. And I would even say that if Netanyahu, I'm going to say something philosophical because it's never going to happen, theoretically, if Netanyahu comes tomorrow morning and offers Israelis a referendum on a deal with the Palestinians. Let's say he says, I got a deal, they're willing to accept it, it's more or less what we all know it's going to be, these are the borders, that's about Jerusalem. I would say 70 to 80% of Israelis will vote for that because it's Netanyahu, because they trust him, they feel safe with him, and that he will bring a good deal. So Israelis are willing to compromise. They're pragmatic, most of them. But it needs to, our government needs to decide between a one-state solution and a two-state solution, declare what it's deciding, and then it needs to work towards that solution.
So Oded, I think what Paul is saying in many ways is this is a political issue more than a substantive one. Do you agree? Do you think there are substantive issues as well in terms of, is it about the messenger or about the substance of what an agreement might look like?
I think it's all of the above. I think you can't deny the fact that we're 2 weeks before elections. Parties running for elections, at least the vast majority of them, don't want anything to have affiliated with the left. Most of them are battling who is more right than the other. Even the new party formed, led by Benny Gantz, they're not right, they're no left. Okay?
Right, the slogan is there's no right or left in Israel.
Okay, they're trying to adopt a police approach. Let's be pragmatic. But we all want to be pragmatic. And when we want to be pragmatic, we have to understand that we're dealing with reasonable people. As far as I understand, the people behind the Oslo Accord were extremely intelligent, wise people. Doesn't mean I agreed with what they did, but their intentions were good. We're 25, 26 years later, the Palestinian Authority is not the Egyptian government. It is an authority which is not governing its people, is not managing to provide basic humanitarian aid, and Israel is pulled back to give humanitarian aid in Gaza and make sure the Palestinian Authority doesn't collapse, because we all understand that then the crisis will be even bigger. So yes, be practical. Netanyahu is being accused of transferring Qatar money into Gaza. Why is he transferring money into Gaza? Because he wants it? Because he wants to deal with Hamas? Because he is being pragmatic and he understands that if he doesn't make sure that Hamas carries on governing Gaza, the situation there can be way worse. We have been in a better situation in Gaza. We were forced to go out. We were promised that once we go out, because of pragmatic reasons, because of keeping the Jewish majority, because of not taking responsibility of other people, because of vast reasons. And what did we get? A humanitarian crisis that now we're condemned of taking responsibility over it. The people who set the land of Israel were ideological people. There's nothing to be ashamed of being ideological. We are believers. We believe in the Bible. There's nothing to be ashamed of believing in the Bible. Does that mean that I'm not praying for peace? Of course I'm praying for peace. During those meetings that you said that AIPAC used to invite us, they used to bring me with Yariv Oppenheimer, the CEO of Peace Now. I used to tease him. I said, I'm a bigger activist in Peace Now than you are. I just don't pay my dues to that organization. I pay 3 times a day that there will be peace upon this earth. But when I'm saying that I want to be also pragmatic, Polly, it means I'm not going to lie down and say, just hit me, and after you hit me on one cheek, I'll give you the other cheek to hit me. The experiment in Gaza failed. The Palestinian administration Oslo Accord failed. I agree with you, Shir, we need to find something else, but it's not on the book, it's not on the table, it's not on the manual that we have now in front of us. And therefore, when I, as a leader, and Benny Gantz just now said it, The safety of our people first. If he wants to provide safety to our people, he can't withdraw back to the 1967 border. He understands he needs to have soldiers on the Jordan Valley, in Judea and Samaria, and you can't have just soldiers without population, because we saw what happened in Philadelphia in the border with the Gaza Strip. You can't just have military presence. There needs to be life, there needs to be livelihood, and that's not even going down the arguments that we have about the rights of our people. So So to sum up, I don't think I'm less pragmatic than Polly. To sum up, I don't think I want peace less than Polly. But to sum up, we cannot repeat experiments that have failed in the past without changing any of the denominators of the experiment and expecting to receive any other result. Thank you.
So, Shir, I know you want to respond. I also want to ask a question based on that. We are in the thick of Israeli election season, and what should be the center-left is hesitating to fully and forcefully endorse a two-state solution. So what do you make of that reality? But I know you have other things you'd like to say as well.
Just before, I have to answer what Oded just said, specifically about the Gaza Strip, which my entire family lives around it. First of all, if it was such a bad experiment, we can reverse it. Bibi Netanyahu and his most right government in the history of Israel can go back inside Gaza tomorrow morning if it was such a big mistake. They don't do that. Ask yourself why. But even more so, if we talk about experiments, I don't know, one of the speakers also in this conference is Einat Wilf, Dr. Einat Wilf. I'm not sure if you heard about the example she gives about another disengagement, the successful one. In 2005, at the same time when we withdraw from Gaza, we also withdraw from northern Samaria for parts around Jenin. We left 4 settlements, but we did it differently. We kept the army, but we took the settlers and the civilians outside. So we kept the military occupation, but we withdraw from civilians, meeting each other every day, fighting each other every day. And look at that, 14 years later, that was a successful example that I don't know if you remember Jenin, which was one of the centers of bomb attacks in the Second Intifada, became today one of the most moderate Palestinian cities. So there is alternative, there is a good experience, and now, and to take that, what you said, that we should take experiments and to see what was successful. So bringing back to Einstein's sayings, we also should see what worked and now multiply it.
Thank you. So, Polly, I said, sort of starting out here, that the goal of this panel wasn't to get into policy prescriptions, but here we are, so let's keep going. Polly, I know that you also, we've spoken a lot about how you keep the idea of two states alive, even if it's not possible now. So what would be some of the things that you would suggest?
First of all, I want to refer to what Oded says, because there is something that Oded is not telling you. What he's not telling you, which
but I'm sure he will be happy to tell us.
There are a lot of things I didn't tell.
And I have
also, Gantz didn't tell what he has in his telephone. What's that relevant, Polly?
That's what they have, seriously. That's what you have, Gantz's telephone. Oded and I do this. Oded and I have a show that we're running in Israel everywhere. We're used to each other, and I heard him many times say, I don't have the solution. If I would have had the solution, I would run for Prime Minister. It's the quote, right? I don't have the solution. So what today Netanyahu is selling, and Oded is selling too, is status quo, or managing the conflict, which, you know what? That's fine. I'm right now happy with managing the conflict. But he's representing, Oded, Yesha Council and the settlement movement that is not about status quo. They are annexing de facto every day land in the West Bank, they have a plan. The plan is to annex. The plan at the end is a one-state solution. When they're telling you there's no solution, they are annexing, they are settling. You can go today to Eli, for example, a settlement which is very much inside the West Bank. It's called Eli and its daughters, because when I stand there in my friend's porch in Eli, and he will show you, they now have daughters. They're putting outposts on every hill to create a reality that is irreversible. Now, I want to tell you what it means to annex the West Bank. It has millions of Palestinians in there. And the dream that the right wing has, that we can annex the land, we can put our border around 3 million Palestinians and not let them be citizens of Israel, not let them be equal citizens of Israel, is delusional. Because Israel will never be a state that allows people to be second-rate citizens. But at the same time, it's not only that we will have to then take care of their lives. We will take in, what, Jenin, Nablus, Jericho, Ramallah will become Israel? And they will become Israelis with all the rights that go with that? Will we risk losing our Jewish majority? And they will tell you, they have different numbers. I'm using the numbers of the Israeli army. The official numbers, 2.8 million Palestinians. So they say 1.5 million, right? That's the number that you use. It doesn't matter. 1.5 million Palestinians is a lot of Palestinians. So when he says, let's just manage the conflict, he's not telling you that, yes, ideology is great. I have ideology too. But their ideology is dangerous. And that ideology will make us go into a one-state solution at the end. Even if we don't choose that, that will be the outcome of not choosing separation from Palestinians. Now, you asked me about practical things. What would I do? You're not running for Prime Minister? Let's say I'm running for Prime Minister. Here's the things that I will promise you I will do once I'm Prime Minister. And they haven't hacked my phone yet, but here's what's on my phone. First of all, I declare that we have no sovereignty claim behind the wall between us and Palestinians. We are not ready for a Palestinian state. We are even not ready for negotiation. We are not sure that there's a partner on the other side. But one day, when we have a partner and we can trust Palestinians, we have that land for them in safekeeping. Our army's there, our settlers stay there, but we have no claim over that land, so everyone is very clear about that. You are clear about that. Israelis are clear. Palestinians are clear. We don't have our eyes set up a one-state solution. Second of all, I finished to build the separation wall. There is no wall between us and Palestinians complete until today. Now, Oded will argue, which we always do, that he doesn't need a wall.
This is working fine. You can just carry on, yeah.
No, I'm sure you have a lot to say. Oded will tell you, in Efrat, he doesn't need a wall. He will say he lives in peace with his Palestinian neighbors and there's no need for a wall. Some of the people in Efrat died in the recent months. You've been in their funerals and their shivas, in their joint supermarket, Rami Levi, next to Efrat, where Palestinians and Israelis are living peacefully together. We need that wall because we don't live peacefully next to each other. And the only reason Oded doesn't want a wall is because they have a plan. And the plan is a one-state solution. And if you have a wall, it's an actual border. And they don't want a border between us and Palestinians. That's the only reason there's still not a complete wall between us and them. So that's the second thing I'm offering, right, in my campaign. We're going to have a wall, a complete wall. And we're going to say where that wall goes. It's on, right? We're going to decide where it is. Third thing, I will tell the settlers on the other side of the wall. By the way, it's very important to know, there are about 500,000 settlers, Israeli Jewish settlers. Most of them, I'm going to talk general numbers, 400,000 out of them live inside what is supposed to be the wall. So they're not going anywhere.
The so-called blocks.
Right, in
settlement
the blocks. For example, Oded knows that his settlement is there to stay. Nobody's threatening Efrat in any deal, future deal with Palestinians. Efrat will stay. Most of the settlements will stay around East Jerusalem, but around 100,000 Israeli settlers are going to live outside the wall. And although I prepare to leave the army there forever, if necessary, and guard them and the territory, I will also offer them compensation if they decide to come and live within the wall. I will tell them right now, there's no deal on the table, nothing changes, but you can still cash in your house and come live within our side of the wall. And I would bet 50% of the Palestinians, that's the numbers that we know about, will take compensation and come live within the area of the wall. What?
The Israelis, but never mind. You said the Palestinians.
No, no,
Offer
of
them
course I
50%.
meant.
Let's see if you offer them money, 50%
That's your plan.
will evacuate.
That's your
No.
plan.
It's not my plan, but let's see them, any of them doing that.
That's an expensive plan.
That's an expensive plan,
But it's a
yeah.
plan.
So I have to cut off a future prime minister, which is not very easy, but I'm doing it. So I do, before we go to Q&A, and I'm going to leave plenty of time for questions because I know you have them, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the bridge building and some of what Polly said is a perfect transition, Oded, to some of the work that you're doing. First and foremost, I would love for you to talk about the work that you're doing with Darkenu and with Polly surrounding civil discourse. But would also like to give you an opportunity, A, to respond, and B, to talk about some of the bridge building that you're doing with your Palestinian neighbors.
This is where I get frustrated when I appear with Polly, after she talks for 10 minutes about what I say when I didn't even open my mouth.
It's a self-moderated panel now, so we're off to the races.
You see, we in Efrat, we've got a phrase that Americans have started liking, even though the founders of the city really thought about it over 35 years ago. That's we don't believe in fences, we believe in building bridges. That's what we've tried for the last 35 years. That's the story of Efrat, a city that looks like a long stretch of a hot dog or a sausage, depends from which part of the world you come from, 5.5 miles from one end to the other. The width of it is the narrowest place is no more than a traffic circle, and yet it's not surrounded by a fence. And yes, the people of Efrat were battling against and protesting against building the security barrier because we know that fences create a sense of security, they don't actually provide security. With the Gaza Strip, we have a solid fence and we get rockets and missiles, and we come to AIPAC to help us raise money for Iron Dome and new technology to identify the tunnels, and we're successful, and then we get attacked by balloons and kites. That's how tragic the conflict is. It has nothing to do with marking borders or drawing lines. It has to do with the recognition of the Jewish people to have a right for a Jewish state. That is the conflict. And keeping on saying that the settlements are an obstacle for peace is a myth that the world believed for many years. And thank goodness, after 52 years, the world is waking up to understand that we are not the obstacle for peace. You come to the Gush Etzion junction that you've mentioned. Yes, there's a supermarket there. As far as I'm concerned, it's a tourist attraction. It's not as big as the supermarkets here in DC or in New York. It's not as clean. The variety is not as big. Service is lousier and the prices are dearer. What makes it a tourist attraction? Because you come in the middle of the conflict zone, in the middle of the battle zone, in the middle of the disputed territories, call it whatever you want. And what do you see there? You see there Jews and Arabs walking up and down the same aisles, picking products, paying for them, and going back home to feed their kids. That's coexistence. That's good neighborhood relationship. And yes, 4.5 years ago there we had a tragic event, 3 youngsters standing in a bus stop, 15 minutes past 10, hitchhiking. It took the state of Israel 18 days to discover that they were murdered a minute and a half after they hitchhiked. Approximately 1,500 days. Since then, we've had 15 terror attacks on that junction. That's right, Polly. And we've had casualties, and we've had people murdered. The last one was a guy from Efrat, Ari Fould. A guy that goes to do shopping for his wife, stabbed in his back by a coward terrorist. Ari Fould doesn't lose it, gets up, shoots the terrorist, runs after him, collapses, and dies. But that's 15 days out of 1,500 days. That's 1%. And the question that I'm asking you is, are we going to give in to the small, extreme, loud, violent minority who has a financial interest in seeing the conflict go on, or are we going to try and empower the 99%? That's the question on the table.
Oded, the people who go to the supermarket at the Rami Levy, in your beautiful picture,
Polly,
are Jews and Arabs
Polly,
that are not
Polly,
so
I
equal.
didn't disturb you.
They are not equal.
I will get to the equal issue.
And because they are not equal,
Polly,
their motivation
I'm going to turn to Shir.
to do terror will never
No.
share.
I'm enjoying so much. Please
Polly,
don't disturb me.
Polly, you've
Oded,
spoken
finish
enough
the
on
point
behalf of
and I
me.
want to move on to Shir.
Okay. The Oslo Accord was a genuine attempt to solve what you are worried about, equal rights and voting rights. And for that, the Palestinian Authority was set with the right for the Palestinian people to vote for the Palestinian Authority. We're in DC. I ran this morning on the Mall. I read what all the founders of this country fought about and wrote about and believed, and some people died over. Democracy, freedom of speech, freedom of movement. Let's look at the eyes of reality. The Palestinian people haven't had the right to vote for the Palestinian Authority for over 13 years because their administration can't guarantee the results to be according to what they want. You're worried about democracy, you're worried about equal rights, make sure that they can vote for their administration. Then let's start talking.
So,
as a kid, I used to wake up having nightmares because the headline in the paper was that the Jewish state is going to lose the Jewish majority within a few years. Surprise. You understand that there have just been a few years since I was a kid. You know what happened 2 years ago? For the first time in history, the birth rate of the Jewish mother equaled the birth rate of an Arab lady. That's where we are today with the threat of demography losing the Jewish majority. But you know what? Even if we go down the road of the two-state solution, we need to understand what is behind that. Because you're worried about losing the Jewish majority, and I'm worried about losing the Jewish majority. And when you listen to those Arab leaders in English and in Arabic, you get two different answers. You know what? The English answer, as a believer in peace, probably will be able to agree on. But you know what they say in Arabic? One state will be a Palestinian state. You know what will be the other state? All its citizen state, with the right of return. So if we're afraid of losing the Jewish majority within the borders that we are today, the suggestion is go and shrink your borders, we'll bring some more Palestinians, and then we'll have two-state solution. That's not the two-state solution that I'm praying for. That's not what I want you to do as a Prime Minister.
So
and that's
that is
why,
not on the table,
and
Oded,
that's
and you know
why
it.
it's not. Nothing's on the table. You know what? You're absolutely right. So the right of return is not on the table. Jerusalem is not on the table. The Jordan Valley is not on the table. So explain to me what's the difference between right and left. There's no difference, and you're absolutely right. The people of Israel have stopped talking about it because they understand that there's no answer at the moment at the foreseen future, and that's why I'm not saying to manage the conflict. I didn't even say once use that expression. What I'm saying is let's try and build bridges. You know why? Because we're not going to go anywhere. They're not going to go anywhere, and we need to find ways to live one alongside the other.
thank you, Oded. Shir, so these are arguments we've heard before. This is a discussion we've been having for a long time. Shir, do you notice some kind of fatigue factor amongst younger would-be activists in Israel? And what are you doing, the organization you founded, have you seen the horizon lately, I think in many ways was established to address how do you engage a younger audience in Israel in this discussion that they may have grown tired of, And again, let's get back to also why is the left not talking about, specifically during these elections, two-state solution?
Well, actually for me, unlike Polly and Oded, it's quite a new subject. I wasn't aware or involved, I must honestly say, on the conflict issue until 2 years ago. I was one of the initiators of the Israeli social protest of 2011, who brought almost 1 million people to the streets on almost every cause you would think about: housing prices, gas prices, even we have feminism movements inside, racism against the Ethiopian conflict, almost every subject in the Israeli society, except for a very, very small, minor issue of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. In that sense, I wasn't unique. I represented my generation, and even more so the more younger ones, that they are very much politically aware, they are very much activist, except for that issue. And like Polly said at the beginning, I'm not sure that we could have such a full house in Israel, and if we did, it would be mostly, it would be with a lot of gray hair. And why is that? It's again, when you think about the young generation in Israel, they were born to a static situation. They didn't see it becoming worse. It's a good thing, right? The security situation in Israel, we must admit, quite good. But they didn't even got better. And for them, when the situation is so static, they cannot imagine a different reality. You have to see that the reality is dynamic in order to believe you can change it and you can influence it. So even though surveys shows that we have a majority, still have a majority, it's unbelievable, in the idea of this two-state solution, at the same time, those same people, especially the young one, just don't believe it is possible. Meaning it's a psychological barrier and not ideological one. And when you understand that this is very simple, why the young generation is not involved. I don't know what about you, I never saw someone trying to promote something that they don't believe it is possible. So when we initiated Have You Seen the Horizon lately, it's the organization I am directed, we said, how can we make the younger generation believe, imagine a different reality? And we brought all kinds of new insights and new perspectives on new ideas you haven't heard so far that are tackling those psychological barriers and are enabling you to imagine a different reality. I think this is what we should be focused on because it's not an ideological barrier. I'm sorry, Oded do not represent the majority of the Israelis in that sense. The majority of the Israelis don't believe in the kumbaya of the Palestinians and the settlers. It sounds very nice, it doesn't hold. And this is why we should ask ourselves, how can we influence reality and how we can go for that northern star of a two-state solution is the only one we got.
Okay, so I'm really glad I brought these questions with me because I've used none of them. However, I'm sure you all have brought questions of your own. And we've got about a half an hour left, and I want to turn the floor over to you, our audience. Please line up behind these two mics, and we'll alternate between microphones. I want to remind all of you, number one, that all AIPAC speakers are guests in our collective home. This is a topic about which and surrounding which people are quite passionate. That is true for Israelis. It is true for pro-Israeli Americans. So certainly ask whatever questions are on your mind, but we will, of course, do it with respect. And just a reminder, again, these are questions, not speeches, and there are a lot of questions, so please keep them short.